Imagine this, your beloved dog goes missing one day without a trace. Days turn to weeks, then to years, and just when you've given up hope, he reappears, miraculously back at your door. But when he finally returns, something's not right. This isn't exactly the same dog you knew. He acts differently, almost like he's haunted by something you can't quite see. What happened to him during those lost years? If you love stories filled with mystery and the unbreakable bond between people and animals, hit that subscribe button. Let's unravel the story of a dog's strange journey home and the unsettling truth his family discovers. The Johnson family adored Max, their loyal Labrador retriever. He'd been with them since he was a tiny puppy, growing up alongside the Johnson children, Emma and Luke. Max was more than a pet. He was part of the family, always waiting by the door, wagging his tail the second they came home, or following them everywhere with that curious look on his face. But then, one summer afternoon, Max disappeared. No one could figure out how he got out of the backyard, which was fenced in tightly. The family searched the neighborhood, posted flyers, and asked everyone they could. But as the days went on, there was no sign of Max. Weeks turned into months, and the Johnsons slowly came to terms with the heartbreaking idea that Max might be gone forever. Life moved on, though there was always an emptiness, a missing piece that only Max had filled. Then, exactly 3 years later, a miracle happened. One rainy night, as Mr. Johnson was about to lock up the house, he saw a shadowy figure standing just beyond the porch light. He squinted through the rain, heart pounding, wondering if it was a stray or some wild animal seeking shelter. But as the figure stepped closer, Mr. Johnson's eyes widened. It was Max. He called to his wife and children, and they all rushed to the door, barely believing their eyes. There, standing in the rain, looking a little older and worn out, was Max. His fur was matted and dirty, and he had a slight limp, but there was no mistaking it. Their dog had finally come home. Emma and Luke threw their arms around him, crying and laughing, while Max wagged his tail weakly as if to say, "I'm here. I made it back." The family quickly brought him inside, dried him off, and fed him, feeling overjoyed and grateful to have their dog back. But as the excitement settled, they started to notice something strange about Max. He wasn't quite the same dog they remembered. First, there were his eyes. They seemed distant, almost haunted, like he was looking at things that weren't there. Max had always been an affectionate dog, but now he would often stare off into space, as if lost in his own thoughts, or perhaps haunted by something unseen. He would tilt his head, his eyes following empty corners of the room, tracking things the family couldn't see. At night, Max would whine and pace around the house, something he had never done before. The first few nights, Mr. Johnson assumed it was because Max was adjusting to being home again. But when the pacing continued, and even seemed to grow worse, the family became concerned. Sometimes Max would stop in the hallway, look toward the front door, and bark, as if something were outside. But each time Mr. Johnson went to check, there was nothing there. Another unsettling behavior began to emerge. Every night Max would head straight to the basement door, scratch at it, and whine. The Johnsons found this especially odd because Max had never liked the basement. He'd always been hesitant to go down there, even avoiding it completely. Yet now it was as though he were drawn to it. Emma even claimed she saw Max standing at the basement door, his tail between his legs, staring at it as if there were something, or someone, down there. One night, Mr. Johnson decided to open the basement door and let Max in, hoping he'd satisfy whatever curiosity or urge was pulling him toward it. But as soon as he opened the door, Max bolted down the stairs, barking wildly. The family followed, and as they reached the bottom of the steps, they saw Max standing rigidly, his gaze locked on a dark corner of the basement. His growl was low, almost feral, as if he were protecting his family from something that only he could sense. Mr. Johnson turned on the basement light, trying to soothe Max. "There's nothing there, boy," he said, his voice wavering slightly. But Max didn't stop. He remained locked onto that corner, barking until his voice became hoarse. The family felt a chill run through them. It was as if Max was warning them about something unseen. After that night, Max's behavior grew more erratic. He'd spend long stretches sitting by the front door, his eyes scanning the yard as if expecting someone or something to arrive. Whenever the Johnsons tried to pull him away, he'd resist, barking frantically if they succeeded. The tension in the house was palpable. It was almost as if Max had brought something back with him, something he was desperate to protect his family from. The Johnsons decided to dig deeper. They wanted to know where Max had been all those years and what might have happened to him. They visited local shelters and even contacted nearby towns to see if anyone had seen Max during his time away. After weeks of searching, they finally got a lead from a farmer who lived miles away. He remembered seeing a dog like Max wandering near his property a couple of years ago. According to him, the dog would appear at the edge of the woods and stare at his farmhouse, but each time he tried to approach, the dog would vanish. The farmer mentioned that his property bordered an area rumored to be haunted, with old ruins from an abandoned village hidden deep within the woods. He described eerie sightings and unexplained noises that the townspeople believed were linked to the area's tragic history. The Johnsons listened, their skin tingling with unease. Had Max somehow wandered through those woods, and could that place have something to do with his strange behavior? Back at home, Max's behavior had grown more intense. He would refuse to eat some days, seemingly fixated on his invisible vigil by the door. Late one evening, as Mrs. Johnson sat beside Max, she noticed something peculiar on his collar. There was an old, frayed piece of fabric stuck in the clasp, almost hidden, and it wasn't anything she recognized. Gently, she removed it and examined it closely. It looked like it had been torn from a piece of clothing, perhaps old-fashioned, something a person might have worn decades ago. Feeling unsettled, she showed it to Mr. Johnson, and they wondered aloud what Max might have encountered in those woods. They were left with more questions than answers, but one thing became clear. Whatever Max had experienced, it had marked him deeply, and while he couldn't tell them in words, his actions spoke volumes. The time away had changed him, and he was no longer just their playful, loving dog. He was a protector, haunted by memories that only he understood. As the weeks went by, Max's behavior eventually calmed, though he would occasionally stare at the front door or growl at unseen figures. The Johnsons couldn't shake the feeling that he had come back to them with a purpose, one tied to whatever he had witnessed or endured. They cherished him even more, grateful for his loyalty and resilience, knowing that, no matter where he had been, Max would always find his way back home. It's stories like these that remind us of the unbreakable bond between animals and humans, a connection that goes beyond words, spanning time, and even the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another tale of mystery, loyalty, and the powerful love of our animal companions.